I stood at the altar, my hands trembling, the whispers of the guests swirling around me like a storm. The music had stopped, the priest's voice faded, and all I could hear was my own pounding heartbeat. My mother, my rock, my best friend was nowhere to be found. The maid of honor leaned in, whispering, "She's gone." Confused and desperate, I turned toward the back of the church, and that's when I saw her, standing by the open doors, holding hands with my ex-fiancé, the man who broke my heart years ago. The Gramercy Park Hotel had been my dream wedding venue since I was 16. My mother had taken me there for brunch after a particularly bad fight with my father, a peace offering disguised as a girl's day out. We sat beneath the crystal chandeliers in the terrace room, sunlight fracturing through them and painting tiny rainbows across the white tablecloths. "Someday," she'd said, sipping her mimosa, "you'll have better taste in men than I did." I remember how she looked around the room, her eyes lingering on the ornate moldings, the lush floral arrangements. This would make a beautiful wedding venue, don't you think, Eliza? 13 years later, I stood in the bridal suite of that same hotel, wondering if that rare moment of maternal warmth had been genuine or just another manipulation. The thought sent a chill through me despite the June heat pressing against the windows. 5 minutes, Miss Bennett." The coordinator's voice chirped through the door, startling me back to the present. My reflection stared back at me, dark hair, pinned in loose waves, makeup subtle but flawless. Ivory dress hugging my body before flowing to the floor. Perfect. Too perfect, maybe. "Mom should have been here by now," I murmured, checking my phone again. No messages. My mother had insisted on getting ready in her own room. "You need your space, darling," but had promised to come help with my veil before the ceremony. My maid of honor, Jess, squeezed my shoulder. "Do you want me to go check on her?" "No, it's fine." I forced a smile. "She's probably just running late." But my mother was never late. Not for anything that mattered to her. The sweet phone rang, making us both jump. Jess answered, her face shifting from annoyed to confused as she listened. "What is it?" I asked when she hung up. That was the front desk. "They said your mom's car is still here, but double quotes." She hesitated. "Your fiancé asked to postpone for 30 minutes. Something about last-minute adjustments?" My stomach clenched. "Did he say what kind of adjustments?" "No, just that he needed to speak with the officiant." I turned back to the mirror, studying my reflection more carefully now. The woman staring back looked suddenly uncertain, vulnerable. I noticed a tiny pearl missing from the bodice of my dress. How had I not seen that before? It seemed like an omen, a small but telling imperfection in the facade. Outside the window, I could see the garden where we would exchange vows. White chairs arranged in perfect rows. An arch of white roses and baby's breath. Guests beginning to filter in, taking their seats, fanning themselves against the summer heat. My father wasn't here either. Heart attack, 3 years ago. The last thing he'd said to me was, "Be careful who you trust, Liza." I thought he was delirious from the medication. Now I wondered. "Miss Bennett," the coordinator again, voice tighter this time. "Your mother asked me to give you this." She slipped a folded note under the door. I picked it up with fingers that had begun to tremble. "Darling," it read in my mother's precise handwriting, "trust me when I say this is for the best. Some things must end before they truly begin." "What does it mean?" Jess asked, reading over my shoulder. I crumpled the note in my fist. "It means something is very wrong." My earliest memory of my mother is her scent Chanel No. 5 in disappointment. I was 4, standing in our Upper East Side kitchen while she inspected my preschool art project. "It's lovely, Eliza," she'd said, but her eyes had already moved. Past me to the window, to something more interesting in the distance. She set my painting aside on top of the mail, where it would later be thrown away with the junk flyers and bills. It became a pattern. I could map like constellations, her absence, even when physically present, the perfunctory kisses on my forehead that never smudged her lipstick, the way her attention would sharpen only when someone else entered the room, particularly if that someone was male. Your mother's just high-strung, my father would explain, when I'd cry after another canceled mother-daughter date. It's not that she doesn't love you, but even at 8, I knew better. I'd seen how she lit up around my cousin Sarah, how she'd brush Sarah's golden hair until it gleamed, by her little presence just because. Sarah was everything I wasn't, blonde like my mother, naturally graceful, effortlessly charming. You, take after your father's side, my mother would say, like an apology for my dark hair and serious eyes. By 12, I'd stopped seeking her approval. The day I made honor roll, she forgot to come to the ceremony. When I had my first heartbreak at 15, she told me I was being dramatic. On my high school graduation, she spent the ceremony texting, then left early for a charity gala. Only once did I confront her about it. I was 17 and had just won a writing contest. The principal had called to congratulate her personally. Why can't you just be proud of me? I demanded that night, finding her at her vanity, removing her makeup. She looked genuinely puzzled. I am proud of you, Eliza. I tell everyone what a clever daughter I have. You tell everyone, but you never tell me. Her eyes had hardened then, something cold and ancient flickering behind them. Love isn't always about saying the words, darling. Sometimes it's about doing what's necessary. What does that even mean? She'd smiled, that perfect porcelain smile that never reached her eyes. You'll understand someday, when you're older. After my father died, she'd softened briefly. For a few months, she'd call regularly, invite me to lunch, ask about my work at the publishing house. I'd been suspicious at first, then gradually hopeful. Maybe grief had changed her. Maybe losing Dad had made her realize what was important. Then I met Carter, and everything changed again. She'd been polite when I introduced them over dinner at her favorite restaurant. Too polite. Her eyes assessed him with a precision that made me uncomfortable, lingering on his hands, his mouth, the way his shirt fit across his shoulders. He's certainly handsome, she'd said afterward as we waited for the valet to bring our cars. But does he make you happy, darling? Truly happy? Yes, I'd said defensively. He does. She'd kiss my cheek, her lips barely grazing my skin. Then I'm happy for you. But her eyes told a different story. They always had. I met Carter Marshall on a rainy Tuesday in April, in the romance section of the bookstore where I often spent my lunch breaks. He reached for the same dog-eared copy of Jane Eyre that I was about to grab. Please, he said, withdrawing his hand with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I've read it 6 times already. I think the universe is telling me to try something new. He had kind eyes, the color of burnt honey, and a quiet confidence that drew me in immediately. By the time the rain stopped, we'd moved from books to coffee, from coffee to an early dinner, from dinner to a walk through the wet streets of the West Village. Steam rising from the pavement around us. Carter was everything that I thought I wanted. Thoughtful, ambitious but not ruthless, funny without being cruel. He worked in finance but spoke passionately about photography, his real love. He listened when I talked about books, about my job as an editor, about my dreams of writing something of my own someday. You should, he'd encouraged. You have a way with words, Eliza. I can hear it even when you're just talking about your day. 3 months later, he took me to meet his parents in Connecticut. They lived in a modest colonial with a wraparound porch and a golden retriever named Winston, who immediately adopted me as his new best friend. His mother hugged me like she'd been waiting years to do it. His father grilled steaks and asked me questions about my life with genuine interest. It was everything a family should be. Everything mine had never been. They loved you, Carter said on the train back to the city, especially my mom. She texted me twice already to say how perfect you are. I'd felt a ping, then not of jealousy exactly, but of longing. To be wanted. That way. To be seen. Our relationship progressed with a comfortable inevitability. We moved in together after 8 months, my apartment, with its better light and proximity to the park. We adopted a cat, a grumpy Persian we named Fitzgerald. We built routines and inside jokes and favorite restaurants. It wasn't perfect. Carter worked long hours, sometimes disappearing into financial spreadsheets for days during the end of each quarter. I had my own tendencies toward overthinking, toward expecting disappointment. But we navigated these things together with patience and humor and an underlying certainty that we were building something worthwhile. When he proposed, on New Year's Eve in our apartment, with takeout Chinese and champagne and coffee mugs because we'd forgotten to buy flutes, I said yes without hesitation. It was only afterward, as we called our families with the news, that I felt the first flicker of unease. "That's wonderful, darling," my mother said, her voice oddly flat. "I was beginning to think you'd never settle down." "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Mom." "Oh, you know what I mean." "Have you set a date?" "Not yet. We're thinking June, maybe." "June is perfect," she said, suddenly animated. "Let me help with the planning. I know everyone in the city. We can get you into any venue you want." Her enthusiasm surprised me. I'd expected polite interest at best. "I thought we'd keep it small," I said cautiously. "Just close friends and family. Nonsense." "This is your wedding, Eliza, the most important day of your life. We should do it properly." I wanted to argue, to insist on our original vision, but something in me, that old, desperate need for her approval, gave way. "Okay," I said. "We can talk about it." In the weeks that followed, my mother transformed into someone I barely recognized, calling daily, sending venue options, arranging tastings. She took over with a frightening efficiency, steamrolling my hesitant objections. Trust me, she'd say, "I know what makes an impact." Carter seemed amused by her intensity at first, then gradually less so. "Is this really what you want?" he asked one night after she'd convinced us to increase the guest list to include business associates of hers I'd never even met. "No," I admitted, "but it makes her happy." "And it's just one day." He'd frowned, concerned. "It's our day, Liz, not hers." But I'd let it continue, telling myself it was easier this way. That maybe, finally, I'd found a way to matter to her. Tension between Carter and me grew as the wedding approached. Small disagreements escalated into arguments. I blamed stress. He blamed my mother's influence. "She's turning this into a spectacle," he said after a particularly contentious meeting with the wedding planner. "This doesn't feel like us anymore." "She's trying to help," I defended, even as I silently agreed with him. 3 weeks before the wedding, I caught him on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. He ended the call abruptly when I entered the room. "Work," he explained, not meeting my eyes. Didn't believe him, but I didn't press. What could I say? That I was becoming my mother suspicious, always looking for betrayal, that I was afraid he was pulling away. Instead, I threw myself deeper into wedding preparations, as if perfecting the details could fix what was beginning. To feel like cracks in our foundation. The morning of our rehearsal dinner, I found a text on his phone while he was in the shower. From my mother. "We need to talk. Alone. It's important." He had responded with a single word. "When?" I deleted the exchange. Before he returned, my hands shaking, and pretended everything was fine. But nothing was fine. Nothing at all. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon, the notes rising like birds into the vaulted ceiling of the Gramercy Park Hotel's garden terrace. Through the French doors, I could see the guests turning in their seats, expectant faces tilted. Toward the entrance where I would soon appear, still no sign of my mother. "We can't wait any longer," the coordinator whispered urgently. "The officiant has another ceremony at 4. I nodded, numb. Jess adjusted my veil one last time, her face tense with concern. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked quietly. Was I? The question echoed in my mind, colliding with memories my mother's strange behavior, Carter's late-night calls, the text I'd found, warning signs I'd willfully ignored. "I just need to find my mother first," I said. "Something isn't right. Eliza, you're about to get married. Whatever drama she's creating can wait, but it couldn't wait." I knew it with a certainty that made my skin prickle with goosebumps despite the summer heat. "Tell the coordinator I need 5 minutes," I said, already moving toward the door. "I'll be right back." I slipped into the hallway, careful to hold my dress away from the walls. The hotel corridor stretched before me, plush carpet muffling my footsteps as I moved toward my mother's room. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat a warning. Her door was ajar. I pushed it open without knocking. The room was empty, her suitcase still there, but her purse gone. On the bed lay a gift box, wrapped in silver paper with a white ribbon by something blue. The sapphire earrings she'd promised to give me before the ceremony. Why leave them here, knowing I wouldn't find them until too late? I turned to leave, and that's when I noticed her phone charging on the nightstand. My mother never went anywhere without her phone, never. With shaking fingers, I disconnected it from the charger and pressed the home button. The screen lit up no passcode, another anomaly. She was pathologically private about her devices. Her text messages were open. The most recent conversation was with Carter. "Meet me in the garden on the east side. We need to settle this before she walks down the aisle." His response, "I'll be there in 2 minutes. Don't do anything until I arrive." The timestamp was 17 minutes ago. The east garden. Not the terrace where the ceremony was set up, but the smaller, private garden that connected to the hotel's restaurant. I moved without thinking, my body operating on instinct while my mind struggled to catch up with what my heart already knew. Down the service stairs to avoid the guests, through the kitchen where startled staff flattened themselves against walls to let the bride in white pass, out through the delivery entrance and around the building's perimeter. The garden was enclosed by high hedges, a hidden oasis in the middle of Manhattan. I paused at the entrance, suddenly afraid of what I would find. Then I heard them. "You can't do this to her." Carter's voice, tight with anger. "Not today. Not like this." "I'm not doing anything to her," my mother replied, her tone maddeningly. "Calm. I'm protecting her from making the same mistake I did. By humiliating her, by ruining her wedding day, by showing her the truth before it's too late." I stepped into the garden then, my dress catching on a rose thorn, the small rip audible in the sudden silence as they noticed me. They stood beneath an arbor of climbing roses, their faces frozen in identical expressions of shock. My mother recovered. First, her perfectly painted lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Eliza, darling, you shouldn't be here. It's bad luck for the groom to see you before the ceremony." "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Carter moved toward me. "Liz, this isn't what it looks like." "Your mother, don't," my mother cut him off. "Don't lie to her, not anymore." She turned to me, her expression softening into something almost like compassion. "I was trying to spare you this, darling. To handle it quietly." "Handle what?" I demanded, looking between them. And then I saw it, my mother's hand reaching for Carter's, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture so intimate, so familiar that it could not be mistaken for anything but what it was. "How long?" I whispered as the world tilted beneath my feet. Carter pulled his hand away from my mother's, his face contorting with what looked like genuine pain. Eliza, please. Let me explain. But my mother stepped forward, placing herself between us like a shield, like she was protecting him. It doesn't matter how long, she said. What matters is that it stops now, today. I stared at her, this woman who had given me life but never love, who had always chosen herself over me. And suddenly, with perfect clarity, I understood. You're not trying to protect me, I said, the truth of it burning through me like acid. You never were. She flinched just slightly, the first genuine reaction I'd seen from her in years. Carter, I said, not looking at him, unable to bear the sight of him. Is she right? Should I walk away? Is there something I need to know? He was silent for too long, his eyes darting between my mother and me, caught in a trap of his own making, and in that silence, I heard everything he couldn't say. The string quartet's music drifted faintly from the terrace, the familiar notes of the wedding march now soundtrack to devastation. In the distance, I could hear the murmur of waiting guests, the occasional laugh, the clinking of champagne glasses being distributed for the toast that would never happen. My mother took a step toward me, her hand outstretched. Eliza, I backed. Away, my veil catching on a branch, pulling painfully at my carefully arranged hair. Don't touch me. Her expression hardened, the mask of maternal concern slipping to reveal something colder beneath. You're making a scene. This isn't the place. Then where is the place? My voice rose, control slipping. When would have been a good time to tell me that my mother and my fiancé? I couldn't finish the sentence, the words too grotesque. To speak aloud. Carter moved then, reaching for me, his eyes pleading. Liz, it's not what you think. Your mother and we were trying to... I held up my hand, stopping him. The text. On your phone. We need to talk. Alone? That was from her? He nodded miserably, and the late-night calls. The work emergencies? Another nod. My mother made a sound of impatience. For God's sake, Eliza, use your head. If Carter and I were having some sordid affair, would we be standing here right now? Would I be trying to stop this wedding? Her. Logic pierced through my shock, creating a moment of doubt. What exactly was I accusing them of? What had I really seen? I looked at their hands still close, but no longer touching. At the space between them, intimate but not romantic. At their faces, guilty, yes, but with something else. Something like fear. Then what? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. What are you hiding from me? My mother glanced at Carter, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then she reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope, yellowed with age. I didn't want to do this today, she said. I wanted to find another way. But you deserve to know the truth before you marry him. She held out the envelope. I didn't. Take it. What is that? The reason you can't marry Carter, she said. The reason I've been meeting with him in secret. The reason I left you waiting at the altar. Carter closed his eyes, his face ashen. Catherine, please. Not like this. My mother ignored him, her gaze fixed on me with an intensity I'd never seen before. Take it, Eliza. Read it. And then decide if you still want to walk down that aisle. The envelope trembled in her outstretched hand, my name written across it in handwriting I recognized, with a jolt my father's dot as I reached for it. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching into eternity. The scent of roses hung heavy in the air. A bead of sweat traced a path down my spine. Somewhere nearby, a bird began to sing. I took the letter, my fingers brushing against my mother's, and in that brief contact, I felt something pass between us. Not love, not forgiveness, but recognition. For the first time in my life, I was seeing her clearly, and she was seeing me. The envelope was unsealed, the flap simply tucked in. As I began to open it, A voice called from the garden entrance. "Miss Bennett, everyone's waiting. The officiant says we really can't delay any longer." I looked up at my mother and Carter, these two people I had trusted most in the world, now strangers to me. "Tell them," I said to the coordinator, not taking my eyes from them. "Tell them the wedding is delayed indefinitely." Then I unfolded the letter and began to read the words my father had written, each line unraveling the carefully constructed lie that had been my life. "Eliza, if you're reading this, I failed to protect you. I promised myself I would tell you everything before this day could come, but death has its own timeline. There are truths about our family that I've kept hidden, not to hurt you, but to shield you for as long as possible. Carter Marshall is your half-brother." The words blurred before my eyes, black ink bleeding into the yellowed paper. I blinked, certain I had misread, but the sentence remained unchanged. My father's familiar handwriting suddenly alien and incomprehensible. "Your mother had an affair with Richard Marshall 29 years ago, before you were born. I discovered the truth shortly after your birth, when you needed a blood transfusion and my blood type wasn't compatible. The doctor explained it was medically impossible for me to be your biological father. Catherine begged me not to leave. She swore Richard didn't know, that it had been a brief indiscretion. I chose to stay, to raise you as my own, because from the moment I first held you, you were my daughter in every way that mattered. We agreed never to speak of it again, to protect you from a truth that could only cause pain. Richard moved his family to Connecticut shortly after, a coincidence that seemed like mercy at the time. I never stopped loving you, Eliza. Never for a moment did I think of you as anything but my child. Blood is nothing compared to the bond we shared. If you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. Catherine promised to destroy this letter after my death. That she has given it to you now means she believes there is no other option. Forgive me for my silence. Forgive yourself for whatever pain this causes. None of this is your fault, Dot, with all my love. Dad, the garden around me vanished. The sounds of distant music, of guests chattering, of birds singing, all faded to nothing. There was only the letter in my hands and the roaring silence in my head. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. My body had turned to stone, a bride-shaped statue in the middle of a Manhattan garden. Carter Marshall was my half-brother, the man I'd slept beside for 2 years, the man whose children I had imagined having, the man who had touched every part of me. My stomach lurched violently. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. Carter, my brother, stepped toward me, his hand outstretched. "Eliza." I flinched away from him, the movement breaking my paralysis. The letter fell from my nerveless fingers to the ground between us. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't touch me. Eliza, please. I only found out 3 months ago, when your mother showed me that letter. 3 months." The timing clicked into place when things had begun to change between us. The secretive phone calls, the distance, the arguments about the wedding. 3 months, I repeated, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. 3 months of lying to my face, of sleeping in my bed, of planning our wedding. He blanched. We didn't not after I knew. I made excuses. Said I was working late, sleeping at the office. "How considerate," I said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. "Such a gentleman." My mother moved then, picking up the fallen letter and carefully refolding it. Her hands were steady, her movements precise. How many times had she practiced this moment in her mind? How long had she planned this grand theatrical revelation? "Eliza," she said, her voice gentle in a way I'd never heard before. "I know this is a shock, but try to understand." "Understand?" The word came out as a broken sound, half laugh, half sob. "Understand what? That you slept with a married man? That you lied to Dad to me my entire life? That you waited until..." My wedding day to tell me the man I love is my brother. I tried to tell you before, she said, her composure slipping slightly. When you first introduced him, I saw Richard in his face immediately, but you were so happy, so in love. I hoped I was mistaken, but you weren't. No, when you got engaged, I knew I had to be certain. I hired a private investigator. The DNA test results came back 3 months ago. And you told him, I said, nodding toward Carter, but not me. I thought he would end it quietly, spare you the truth. I looked at Carter, who stood with his head bowed, shoulders hunched as if bearing impossible weight. But he didn't. No, my mother said, a flash of the old coldness returning to her eyes. He said he loved you too much to let you go without an explanation, that you deserve the truth. I disagreed. Of course she had. My mother, the queen of secrets and lies, would never choose honesty if deception was an option. So this, I gestured around us at the garden, the hotel, the wedding beyond. This entire spectacle was what? Your backup plan? Let me get all the way to the altar before pulling the rug out from under me. I was trying to find the right moment, she said. But there is no right moment for something like this. No right moment, no right words. No right way to discover that your entire life has been built on a foundation of lies. I became aware suddenly of the weight of my wedding dress, the pinch of my shoes, the tickle of loose hair against my neck where my veil had pulled it free. Physical sensations anchoring me to a body that no longer felt like mine. Eliza? My mother's voice, uncharacteristically uncertain. Say something. I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. The perfect makeup that concealed the lines around her eyes. The rigid posture that spoke of a lifetime of self-control. The tremor in her hand as she clutched my father's letter. The only visible sign of her distress. She had never been the mother I needed. Never shown me the love I craved. And now I understood why. Every time she looked at me, she saw her sin made flesh. Her betrayal given life and form. Her mistake that could never be undone. I wasn't just her daughter. I was her secret. Her shame. Her penance thought the realization didn't hurt as much as I expected. Instead, it filled me with a strange, detached calm. What happens now? I asked the question directed at neither of them and both of them. They exchanged glances. My mother and my almost husband, my almost brother, co-conspirators in the destruction of my life. We'll make an announcement, my mother said, practical as always. A sudden illness, a postponement, not a cancellation. It will give us time to... No, I interrupted. I mean what happens to me. Who am I now? If Thomas Bennett wasn't my father, if Carter can't be my husband, I stopped, unable to find words for what my mother was or wasn't to me now. Carter spoke then, his voice rough with emotion. You're still you, Liz. This doesn't change who you are, but it did. It changed everything. Every memory, every moment, every truth I thought I knew. I reached up and removed my veil, the pearls, and crystals scattering as I pulled the pins from my hair. The simple action felt like shedding a skin, stepping out of a life that no longer fit. I need to go, I said. Go where? My mother asked, alarm breaking through her composure. Eliza, you can't just leave. There are guests. Arrangements to be made. I cut her off. There is no we anymore. If there ever was. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back at them. My mother watched me with an expression I couldn't read regret. Relief? Carter stared at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. I hope it was worth it, I said. All the lies. All the secrets. I hope protecting yourselves was worth destroying me. Then I walked away, my ruined wedding dress trailing behind me, leaving them standing beneath the rose arbor with nothing but the truth between them. I made it as far as the service corridor before Jess found me. Her eyes widened at the sight of my tear-streaked face, my disheveled hair. What happened? Everyone's waiting and the wedding's off, I said flatly. I need to get out of here. Off? What do you mean off? Eliza, what's going on? I couldn't answer, couldn't form the words to explain the inexplicable. Just help me leave. Please, I'll explain later. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. My car's in the parking garage. Let me grab your things from the bridal suite. 20 minutes later, we were in her car, my wedding dress stuffed unceremoniously in the back seat, my feet bare, my hair falling loose around my shoulders. I stared straight ahead as Jess navigated through midtown traffic, her worried glances burning against the side of my face. Do you want to go to your apartment? She asked as we hit a red light at Park Avenue. No. The thought of returning to the home I'd shared with Carter made me physically ill. Your place? Just for tonight, of course. She hesitated, then asked, should I call someone? Your mom? Carter? No. The word came out sharper than I intended. No, I repeated more softly. I don't want to talk to either of them, ever again. She raised her eyebrows but didn't press. We drove the rest of the way to her Brooklyn apartment in silence, the only sound the occasional ping of my phone as messages poured in from guests, from the wedding planner, from the hotel. I ignored them all. It wasn't until we were inside her apartment, the door locked behind us, that she asked again, Eliza, what the hell happened back there? I opened my mouth to tell her, then closed it again. How could I possibly explain? What words could capture the magnitude of the revelation? Carter, and I can't get married, I said finally. But single quotes S. Complicated. Complicated how? Did he cheat on you? Because if that asshole, no. I almost laughed at the irony. No, it's not that. I took a deep breath. He's my brother. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, horror, understanding. You're what? How is that even possible? Half-brother. Same father, except his father knew he existed. Mine didn't. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Holy shit, Jess whispered. Holy actual shit? And you just found this out today? At your wedding? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That's beyond fucked up. Who told you? How did you find out? My mother, I said. She left me a letter from my dad from Thomas. He knew. He knew I wasn't his biological daughter. He knew all along. Jess sat down heavily on her couch. And your mom, what decided your wedding day was the perfect moment to drop this bomb on you? Apparently, she told Carter 3 months ago, showed him proof, DNA tests. My voice sounded distant, detached, as if I were discussing someone else's tragedy. They've been meeting in secret, trying to figure out how to handle the situation. That's why you were looking for her? You saw them together, in the garden, holding hands. The memory flashed before my eyes, my mother's fingers intertwined. With Carter's, the familiar intimacy of the gesture. I thought ... God, I thought they were having an affair. Jesus, Eliza. Jess ran a hand through her hair. That's almost would have been better, would it? I asked hollowly. At least then it would have been a betrayal I could understand. A sign with a name. This is ... I trailed off, unable to find words adequate to the horror. My phone buzzed again. Carter's name appeared on the screen. I declined the call. He keeps trying to reach me, I said. Both of them do. Like, they think there's something they can say that will make this okay. What did he say when you found out? I tried to remember Carter's exact words, but the moment was a blur, details lost in the shock that followed. That he only found out 3 months ago, that he didn't touch me after he knew. How magnanimous of him, Jess said bitterly. He said he wanted to tell me the truth himself, that I deserved an explanation. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. As if any explanation could possibly matter. And your mother? What did she say? That she was trying to protect me. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. That's always her excuse. Every cruelty, every lie, every abandonment, all for my own good, all to protect me. I stood up abruptly, pacing the small living room, energy surging through me. The numbness was wearing off, shock giving way to something hotter, sharper. She never loved me, I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke it aloud. She couldn't even look at me without seeing her mistake, her affair, her sin. Eliza, no, it makes perfect sense now. Why she was always so distant. Why nothing I did was ever good enough. Why she could love Sarah but not me. My voice rose, words tumbling out faster. She wasn't cold because she couldn't love. She was cold because she couldn't love me. Jess stood up and caught my hands, stopping my frantic movement. Listen to me. Your mother is a fucking monster. What she did, keeping this from you, then revealing it in the cruelest possible way, that's unforgivable. But this isn't about you being unlovable. This is about her being incapable of love. I pulled away from her, anger flaring bright and hot. Don't try to make this better. It can't be better. My entire life has been a lie. My father wasn't my father. My fiancé is my brother. My mother is a stranger who's hated me from the moment I was born. There is no silver lining here. I'm not looking for a silver lining. I'm saying you have every right to be furious, to scream and rage and burn it all down. But I won't let you believe, even for a second, that this happened because you weren't worthy of love. The anger drained from me as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving me hollow and exhausted. I sank back onto the couch, pulling a throw pillow against my chest like armor. What am I supposed to do now? I asked, my voice small. Jess sat beside me, her face fierce with loyalty. First, you let yourself feel whatever you need to feel. Angry, sad, confused, all of it. Then, when you're ready, you start rebuilding. On your terms, without them. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Eliza, please call me. We need to talk about how to handle this situation. As if this were a PR crisis, a social embarrassment, a problem to be managed. I turned off my phone and tossed it onto the coffee table. I don't want to talk to either of them, I said. Not today. Maybe not ever. You don't have to, Jess assured me. You don't owe them anything. Not your time, not your forgiveness, not even your anger. But anger was all I had left. Anger and questions, endless, unanswerable questions. Had Richard Marshall known about me? Had he suspected when Carter brought me home to Connecticut that I was his daughter? Had there been signs I'd missed, clues I'd overlooked? And Carter, had he really been as shocked as he claimed? Or had he suspected something too, some subconscious recognition that explained the immediate connection between us? The thought made my skin crawl. I need a shower, I said suddenly, desperate to wash away the day, to scrub my skin until no trace of the wedding, of Carter, of my mother remained. Jess nodded, understanding. I'll find you some clean clothes and maybe order some food. You must be starving. I wasn't. The thought of eating made my stomach turn, but I nodded anyway, grateful for her concern, for the normality of the suggestion. In the bathroom, I stood under the shower until the water ran cold, letting it wash away. My tears, my makeup, the hairspray and perfume, and all the other trappings of the bride I would never be. I scrubbed until my skin was raw, as if I could somehow cleanse myself of the knowledge that now lived inside me. When I emerged, wrapped in Jess's bathrobe, I felt emptied out, hollow, like a shell washed up on shore. Everything that had once lived inside me gone. She had laid out sweatpants and a t-shirt on her bed, along with a glass of wine and 2 white pills that I recognized as sleeping tablets. Just in case, she said, hovering in the doorway. I thought you might want to sleep. Sleep seemed impossible, but unconsciousness that I could welcome, thank you. Do you want to talk more? Or would you rather be alone? I considered the question. The thought of being alone with my thoughts was terrifying. But what was there to say that hadn't already been said? Could we just sit? Watch something mindless on TV? I don't want to think anymore tonight. Of course. She squeezed my shoulder. Whatever you need. We settled on her couch with wine and a mindless reality show, the kind where beautiful people created artificial drama for cameras. Under different circumstances, it might have been comforting. Now it just highlighted the absurdity of my own situation, a soap opera twist in what I thought was a normal life. I keep thinking this isn't real, I said, breaking the silence that had settled between us. That I'll wake up tomorrow and it will all have been a nightmare. Jess looked at me, her eyes full of compassion. I wish I could tell you that's true. No, I whispered. Me too. The pills and wine eventually took effect, dragging me down into a mercifully dreamless sleep. But even as consciousness slipped away, one thought remained, burning like a brand in my mind. My mother had destroyed my wedding day, my relationship, my entire understanding of myself. And I still didn't know why. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the scent of coffee brewing. For one blissful moment, I existed in the liminal space between sleep and full awareness. Free from memory. Then it all came rushing back. The wedding, the garden, the letter, Carter, my mother. The truth. I pressed my face into the pillow, willing myself back to unconsciousness. But the day insisted on beginning. Reality refused to be denied, and my body traitor that it was had apparently decided to keep functioning. Despite everything, Jess appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee, her face carefully composed into an expression that wasn't quite pity. Morning, she said cautiously. How are you feeling? A laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. Like I discovered my fiancé is my brother and my entire life has been a lie. So, not great. She winced, that handed me the coffee. Fair enough. Stupid question. I sat up, accepting the mug gratefully. The bitter warmth of the coffee grounded me, a small but tangible pleasure in a world that had lost all sense. Had you checked your phone? She asked after a moment. I shook my head. I'm not ready to deal with any of it yet. You don't have to. But there are a lot of people worried about you. The wedding party, your friends from work, people who had witnessed my humiliation, people who were now speculating, gossiping, wondering what catastrophe had befallen the Bennett Marshall wedding. What would they be told? What explanation could possibly be given? What time is it? I asked instead of answering. Almost noon. Noon? I blinked in surprise. I slept that long? You needed it. She hesitated, then added, I called in sick for you at work. Told them you had food poisoning? Thanks, I said, though the gesture seemed absurdly inadequate. Food poisoning. As if I'd be back at my desk in a day or two, everything normal again. As if anything would ever be normal again. My gaze fell on my wedding dress, crumpled in the corner of the room where I'd discarded it last night. Ivory silk now creased and stained, pearls missing from the bodice, a tear along the hem where it had caught on the rose thorn. A ruined dress for a ruined bride. I should go home, I said suddenly. I can't hide in your apartment forever. Are you sure? You can stay as long as you need to. I'm sure. I wasn't, not really. But the alternative remaining in this state of suspended animation, this not quite real existence seemed worse somehow. I need to face it eventually. Might as well be now. She nodded, understanding. I'll drive you. No, I think I need to do this alone. I forced a smile that felt like a grimace. But thank you for everything. An hour later, showered and dressed. In borrowed clothes, I stood outside the apartment building I'd shared with Carter for the past year and a half. It looked exactly the same: red brick facade, black wrought iron fire escape, the bodega on the corner where we bought coffee on. Lazy Sunday mornings. The same, but utterly different. I hadn't turned my phone back on, hadn't checked messages, hadn't spoken to anyone but Jess. The world outside this sidewalk, the guests who had gathered for a wedding that never happened, the vendors who had prepared food that was never eaten, the hotel staff who had witnessed my flight all existed in a parallel universe. When I wasn't ready to rejoin, the doorman did a double take when he saw me. "Miss Bennett." "I thought that is," Mr. Marshall said. He stopped, flustered. "Said what?" I asked, suddenly needing to know. He shifted uncomfortably. "That you were staying with a friend. That you weren't feeling well. Not the whole truth." Then, just enough to explain my absence without raising questions. "Is he upstairs?" I asked, dreading the answer. "No, ma'am. He left early this morning with a suitcase. Said he'd be gone a few days." Relief washed through me. I wouldn't have to face him. "Not yet. Thank you, Hora," I said, moving toward the elevator. "Miss Bennett," he called after me. "I'm sorry about the wedding. Whatever happened, I hope it works out." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and stepped into the elevator. Our apartment, my apartment now, I supposed was on the 7th floor, with windows overlooking the park. I hesitated at the door, key in hand, suddenly afraid of what I might find inside. Would it look different now? Would I see it with new eyes, every object tainted by the knowledge of what Carter and I had unknowingly been to each other? I pushed the door open. Everything was exactly as we'd left it yesterday morning. Carter's jacket thrown over a chair. My book on the coffee table, bookmark still in place. Fitzgerald, the cat, curled on the windowsill, blinking lazily at my entrance. A life interrupted, frozen in time. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching nothing, seeing everything. The framed photos of us on the bookshelf. The wedding gifts stacked in the corner, still wrapped. The suit Carter had planned to wear. Hanging on the closet door. In the kitchen, a bottle of champagne chilled in an ice bucket, now melted to tepid water. A note propped against it in Carter's handwriting. For after the wedding. "Here's to forever." I picked up the bottle and hurled it against the wall with all my strength. It shattered spectacularly, champagne and glass exploding across the white tiles. Fitzgerald yowled and bolted from the room. I stood frozen, watching the liquid drip down the wall, the destruction oddly satisfying. Then I sank to the floor and cried deep, wrenching sobs that tore through me like physical pain. I cried for the life I thought I had. For the father who had left me despite everything. For the mother who never could. For the man I'd loved who was never meant to be mine. I cried until there were no tears left. Until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen. Until the storm of grief had passed, leaving behind a strange, clear, calm. I stood up, wiped my face, and went to find a broom for the broken glass. As I cleaned, memories surfaced, unbidden small moments that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now took on new meaning. The first time I'd met Carter's parents. How his mother had studied my face with an odd intensity, then asked about my family with careful casualness. Had she known? Suspected? Or had she simply seen the resemblance between her husband and me? A resemblance I'd been blind to. The night Carter and I had discovered we shared the same rare blood type. "Must be fate," he joked. Not fate. Genetics stopped the Christmas dinner where his father had drunk too much and kept staring at me across the table, then abruptly left the room when I'd mentioned my own father's death. I thought he was being rude. Now I wondered if it had been guilt, the unexplained tension whenever I'd tried to plan joint family gatherings. The way my mother had always found excuses not to meet Carter's parents, despite her obsessive involvement in every other aspect of the wedding planning. So many signs, so many clues, all overlooked because the truth was too monstrous to contemplate. After cleaning the kitchen, I moved to the bedroom. Carter's things were everywhere, his watch on the nightstand, his clothes in the closet, his books stacked haphazardly. By his side of the bed, physical reminders of a relationship that could never be reclaimed. I opened his nightstand drawer, not sure what I was looking for. Inside was a leather-bound journal I'd never seen before. I hesitated, then opened it. The first entry was dated 3 months ago, the day after my mother had shown him the letter, the DNA test results. His handwriting, usually neat, was jagged and uneven. The words sometimes pressed so hard into the paper they tore through. I don't know how to write this. How to make sense of it. Eliza is my sister. My sister, the woman I've loved for 2 years, the woman I've asked to marry me, shares my blood. I feel sick, physically ill. Catherine showed me the proof today, DNA tests, a letter from Thomas. Bennett admitting he wasn't Eliza's biological father. My father, our father, has no idea. Or so Catherine claims. How do I tell her? How do I look the woman I love in the eyes and say these words? How do I explain that everything we've built together, everything we've planned, is now impossible? Catherine wants me to end it quietly, make up a lie, spare Eliza the truth. As if any lie could hurt less than what we've unknowingly done, I turned. The page, my hands shaking, I tried to end it today. Told Eliza I needed space, that I was having doubts. She looked so confused, so hurt. Said we could postpone the wedding if I wasn't ready, work through whatever was bothering me. How could I tell her that what's bothering me can never be fixed? That the problem isn't cold feet, but shared blood? I'm a coward. I know that. Every day I don't tell her the truth is another betrayal. But I can't find the words. Can't bear to see the look on her face when she understands what we are to each other. Catherine calls every day, wanting updates, making plans. As if this were a business transaction gone wrong rather than 2 lives destroyed. She's afraid of the scandal, the whispers. Afraid her secret will finally come to light after all these years. I hate her for this, for what she's done to Eliza, to me, to us. But I'm no better. Every night I sleep beside my sister, holding back the truth that would set her free from this cursed union. I closed the journal, unable to read more. It felt like violating a grave, disturbing something that should remain buried, but it confirmed what I already knew. My mother had prioritized her reputation over my happiness, had been willing to let me marry my own brother rather than face the consequences of her actions, and Carter, for all his protestations of love, had been too weak to tell me the truth until it was almost too late. I moved to the closet and pulled out a suitcase. There was nothing for me here anymore. No truth to be found in these rooms, these things, these memories. As I packed, my anger solidified into something harder, colder, more focused. Not the wild rage of yesterday, but a crystalline determination. I would not be a victim of my mother's manipulations any longer. I would not let this revelation define the rest of my life. There were still questions that needed answers. Why had my mother revealed the truth now, after keeping it hidden for nearly 30 years? What had changed? What had she hoped to gain? And deeper questions, ones that touched the foundations of my identity. Who was I, if not Thomas Bennett's daughter? What part of me came from Richard Marshall, this stranger whose blood I shared? How much of my life had been shaped by lies I didn't even know I was living? I had built my understanding of myself on certain bedrock truths, my parents, my history, my place in the world. Now that foundation was gone, crumbled to dust, leaving me suspended over an abyss of uncertainty, But in that uncertainty, I realized there was also a possibility. The chance to rebuild, to redefine, to reclaim myself on my own terms. I zipped the suitcase closed with a decisive motion. There was no going back to who I had been before yesterday. That woman, the trusting daughter, the loving fiancé no longer existed. But perhaps the woman I could become would be stronger, wiser, free from the lies that had bound her. As I headed for the door, my gaze fell on the engagement ring I'd placed on the coffee table. The diamond caught the afternoon light, refracting it into tiny rainbows across the wall. Beautiful, deceptive, a promise that could never be kept. I left it where it lay, outside. The city continued its relentless rhythm taxes, honking pedestrians, hurrying past, life proceeding with indifferent normality. The world hadn't stopped, even if mine had. I pulled out my phone and finally turned it on. Messages flooded in dozens from friends, from wedding guests, from concerned colleagues. Several from Carter, more from my mother. I ignored them all and opened a new text to just. I need a place to stay for a while. Longer than a night. Her response came immediately. My couch is your couch for as long as you need it. Are you okay? No, I typed back honestly. That I will be. I'm going to find out the whole truth. No matter what it takes, because that's what this came down to in the end. Not just the shock of discovering Carter was my brother. Not just the pain of losing the future I'd planned, but the lifetime of lies that had led to this moment. The secrets my mother had kept, the truths my father had taken to his grave. I deserved to know all of it. The complete, unvarnished reality of who I was and where I came from. And once I had dragged every last secret into the light, then I could begin again. Build something real on the ruins of the life I thought was mine. I flagged down a taxi, gave Jess's address, and didn't look back at the apartment building as we pulled away. That chapter was closed now. The story that remained to be written would be mine alone. Whatever came next, whatever truths I uncovered, whatever pain I had to face, I would do it on my terms, not as the pawn in my mother's games, not as the unwitting victim of circumstances beyond my control, but as myself, whoever that turned out to be. 3 weeks after what should have been my wedding day, I stood in the dusty attic of my childhood home, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the ghosts of a family I no longer recognized. My mother had been calling daily, her messages growing increasingly desperate. We need to talk, Eliza. There are things you don't understand. I'd blocked her number after the 20th call. Whatever explanation she wanted to offer, I wasn't ready to hear it. Carter had stopped trying to reach me after the first week. His last text, I never meant to hurt you. I'm leaving New York for a while. I'm sorry, Sam answered in my phone. What could I possibly say to the man who is both my ex-fiancé and my half-brother? What words existed for that impossible relationship? Are you sure you want to do this alone? Jess asked from the attic doorway, concern etched on her face. I can stay, help you sort through all this. I shook my head. I need to do this myself. But thanks for the ride. She hesitated. Your mother could come back anytime. She only left for that charity thing in Boston this morning. She'd be gone until Sunday. The Catherine Bennett Foundation Gala is her crown jewel. She wouldn't miss it for anything. Not even for her daughter's emotional collapse. Especially not for that. Jess nodded, unconvinced. Call me when you're done. I'll come get you. Well, after she left, I surveyed the attic with grim determination. Somewhere in this mausoleum of family history were answers, real ones. Not the carefully curated version of the past my mother had fed me all my life. I started with the most obvious place, my father's belongings. After his death, my mother had packed away his things with an efficiency that bordered on ruthlessness. 3 years of his life reduced to 5 cardboard boxes labeled simply Thomas. The first box contained clothes ties still neatly rolled, cufflinks in their original boxes, the blue sweater I'd given him for his last Christmas. I ran my fingers over the soft wool, remembering how he'd worn it every weekend that winter, even when the New York weather turned unseasonably warm. He had loved me. Whatever the truth of my parentage, whatever secrets he'd kept, that much I knew was real. The way he'd taught me to ride a bike, read me stories at night, beamed with pride at every school achievement. Those memories weren't lies. The second box held books, his collection of first edition mysteries, dog-eared paperbacks. From college, leather-bound volumes of poetry he'd read aloud on rainy afternoons. Tucked between 2 novels was a photograph I'd never seen before my father as a young man, arm around a friend, both laughing at something outside the frame. I turned it over. Tom and Rich, Princeton single quotes 88.Rich. Could it be Richard Marshall? Carter's father, my biological father? They'd known each other in college. I set the photo aside and continued searching. The third box contained financial records, old tax returns, insurance policies, the paper trail of an orderly life. Nothing unusual, nothing revelatory. In the fourth box, I found more personal items: his passport, collection of vintage watches, the fountain pen I'd given him when I graduated college, and beneath them, a small leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age, the binding cracked and worn. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first entry was dated September 1995, 6 months before my birth. Catherine is pregnant. She's ecstatic, already planning the nursery, choosing names. I should be happy too. We've wanted this for so long. But something feels off. She's been distant lately, secretive. When I asked if she'd told Richard about the baby, she changed the subject. I'm probably imagining things. Stress at work, the pressure of impending fatherhood. But I can't shake this feeling that something isn't right. Richard, there it was again. Confirmation that my father had known Richard Marshall before I was born. That they hadn't been strangers who happened to live in different cities, as my mother had implied. I flipped forward, scanning entries, my heart pounding harder with each revelation. March 15th, 1996. Eliza was born today, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect in every way. I never knew I could love someone so completely, so instantly. Catherine seems relieved, almost surprised by how smoothly everything went. The nurse mentioned something about the baby's blood type being different from mine. Probably a mistake in the paperwork. April 3rd, 1996. Had to take Eliza to the hospital. High fever, doctors concerned about infection. They needed to do a blood transfusion. My blood wasn't compatible. The doctor took me aside, explained that it was medically impossible for me to be Eliza's biological father. I felt like I was falling through the floor. Catherine denied everything at first, then broke down when I showed her the test results. Admitted she'd had an affair with Richard last summer. Said it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But she never told him about the pregnancy. That she always wanted to believe the baby was mine. April 10th, 1996. Haven't slept in days. Can't eat, can't think. Catherine begs me not to leave. Says she loves me, that it was only one time, that she never see Richard again. I look at Eliza in her crib, so innocent, so unaware of the chaos around her. How could I leave her? How could I punish this child for her mother's sins? I've made my decision. I will stay. I will be Eliza's father in every way that matters. But things with Catherine will never be the same. I closed the journal, tears blurring my vision. My entire life had been built on this moment, my father's. Choice to stay, to claim me as his own despite knowing the truth. A noble decision, perhaps. A loving one, certainly. but also the foundation of a lifetime of lies. I continued searching, moving methodically through the boxes, piecing together a history I'd never known. In the fifth box, hidden beneath old photo albums, I found a manila envelope. Inside were letters, dozens of them, spanning decades. All from Richard Marshall to my father. Tom. I don't know how to write this. I saw Catherine yesterday. She says the baby, your daughter, might be mine. I had no idea she was pregnant when I ended things last summer. I never would have touched her if I'd known she was married to you. You have to believe that. You were my best friend. I've betrayed you in the worst possible way. Tom, please answer my calls. We need to talk about this. If Eliza is my daughter, I have a right to know her. Catherine says you've threatened to take the child and leave if she ever tells me the truth. Is that really what you want? To raise her on a foundation of lies? It's been 5 years now. I saw a picture of Eliza in Catherine's Christmas card. She has my mother's eyes, Tom. My mother's exact eyes. How can you look at her every day and not see it? How can you keep this from me? I have a son now, Carter. They're siblings, Tom. Half-siblings. Who will never know each other. Is that what you want for them? I'm moving my family to Connecticut. Catherine tells me you're still in New York. It's better this way. Distance, space, a chance for both of us to move on. I won't contact you again after this, but know that I've never forgotten. And I've never forgiven myself. The last letter was dated just 6 months before my father's death. Tom, I heard about your heart condition. I'm sorry. Despite everything, I never wanted this for you. I've respected your wishes all these years. Stayed away from Eliza. Never told Carter about his half-sister. But when you're gone, the choice of whether to maintain this secret will fall to Catherine. Can you trust her to do what's right? To protect Eliza from the truth? Or should we finally end the charade? Let me know if you want to talk. For Eliza's sake, if not for the friendship we once had. My father had never responded to that last letter. Had never reconciled with his former best friend. Had gone to his grave with his secrets intact, leaving my mother as the sole guardian of the truth. But there was one thing I still didn't understand. If my mother had kept this secret for nearly 30 years, why reveal it now? Why wait until my wedding day, until the most publicly humiliating moment possible? The answer wasn't in my father's papers, which meant I needed to look elsewhere. I moved to the far corner of the attic, where my mother's things were stored with characteristic precision banker's boxes labeled by year, category, importance. I pulled down the ones marked Personal 1996 and began to search. What I found was a meticulously documented life photographs, day planners, correspondence, all preserved as if for future reference or future defense. My mother had always maintained her own narrative with careful attention to detail. In a folder labeled I found what I was looking for, evidence of the affair that had led to my birth. Photos of my mother and a man I recognized from Carter's family albums. Richard Marshall, younger, handsomer, but with the same eyes I'd seen in the mirror all my life. The same eyes Carter had. Hotel receipts, movie ticket stubs, a pressed flower with a note for Catherine, who makes everything more beautiful just by existing. It hadn't been a one-time mistake, as she told my father. It had been a full-blown affair lasting months, ending only when Richard's wife had become suspicious. I kept digging, moving through the years chronologically, searching for the thread that would lead to the present, to the wedding, to the moment of revelation. In a box labeled 2021, I found my answer: medical records, a cancer diagnosis. Richard Marshall had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 3 months before my wedding date, terminal, inoperable, 3 to 6 months to live. And with that diagnosis, a letter to my mother, Catherine, I'm running out of time. I've respected Tom's wishes all these years, kept my distance from Eliza, but I can't die knowing my children might someday meet, fall in love, marry, never knowing the truth of their connection. Carter is dating someone seriously now. He talks about proposing soon. I need your word that you'll make sure he never unknowingly becomes involved with Eliza, that you'll tell them both the truth if necessary. I know what this will cost you, your carefully constructed image, the lie you've maintained for decades. But some truths can't stay buried forever. Especially not this one. Attached to the letter was a note in my mother's handwriting, promise made via phone. Assured him children will never meet, but we had met, had fallen in love, had planned to marry. Either my mother had broken her promise to a dying man, or she'd never imagined the cosmic joke the universe would play that out of all the men in New York, I would find my own half-brother. I sat back on my heels, the pieces finally falling into place. Richard Marshall's illness had forced my mother's hand. The revelation of our blood tie had become inevitable. But instead of telling us immediately, she'd waited, watched our relationship develop, helped plan our wedding, all the while knowing it could never happen. Why? To maintain control? To choose the moment of revelation herself? Or because some twisted part of her enjoyed watching the drama unfold, enjoyed being the one to finally speak the truth after decades of lies? I would never fully understand her motivations, but I understood enough now to know what I needed to do next. It was time for a family reunion. The Connecticut home where Carter had grown up looked exactly as I remembered it, white colonial, wraparound porch, flowering hydrangeas lining the front walk. The golden retriever Winston barked from somewhere inside as I approached the door. My heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I hadn't called ahead, hadn't warned anyone I was coming. The element of surprise seemed important somehow, a small power I could claim in a situation where I'd been powerless for too long. Richard Marshall opened the door himself, thinner than I remembered, his complexion gray beneath his tan. The cancer was taking its toll. Yes? Can I? He stopped, recognition dawning in his eyes, my eyes. Eliza. Hello, Richard, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. Or should I call you Dad? He flinched as if I'd struck him, then stepped back, opening the door wider. Please, come in. The house was quieter than I remembered, the cheerful clutter of family life replaced by the sterile orderliness of illness. Medical equipment in the corner of the living room. Prescription bottles lined up on the coffee table. A hospital bed visible through a doorway that had once led to a home office. Carter isn't here, Richard said, watching me carefully. He's in California. Has been since our wedding day, that wasn't. I finished for him. I'm not here to see Carter. He nodded, understanding. You know then, that you're my biological father. That my entire life has been a lie orchestrated by you and my mother and the man I thought was my father. Yes, I know. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Not orchestrated, he corrected gently. None of us planned this, Eliza. We were young, made mistakes, tried to protect the people we loved. It just spiraled. For 30 years, I challenged. But it's quite a spiral. He sighed heavily, lowering himself into an armchair with the careful movements of someone in constant pain. You're right to be angry. You have every right to hate all of us. But before you judge too harshly, at least let me tell you my side of the story. I remained standing, unwilling to settle into the false comfort of a family conversation. This wasn't a reconciliation, it was a reckoning. I read the letters you wrote to Thomas Bennett, I said. I know you wanted to be part of my life, that he threatened to take me away if my mother ever told you the truth. Richard looked surprised. You found those? I found a lot of things, including your cancer diagnosis. The reason my mother finally decided to tell me the truth, though she waited until the most publicly humiliating moment possible to do it. He closed his eyes briefly. That wasn't what I wanted. When I found out about you and Carter, I asked Catherine to tell you both immediately. That was 3 months ago. Why didn't you tell us yourself? I promised your father, Thomas, that I would stay away from you. It was the hardest promise I ever made, but I kept it. For your sake. He was a good father to you, Eliza. Better than I could have been. So you just what? Sat back and watched as Carter and I planned our wedding, as we prepared to commit incest? He flinched at the ugly word. No, when Carter first told me about you, I suspected. The timing, your mother's name, the way he described. It all fit. I asked to see a photo, and when I did, he trailed off, shaking his head. You look so much like my mother. Same eyes, same smile. I knew immediately. And you still didn't tell us? I called Catherine that night. Told her it was time to end the charade. She asked for time to figure out how to tell you both. Said she wanted to do it in a way that would cause the least pain. He laughed bitterly. I should have known better than to trust her. Why did she wait until the wedding day? Why let it go that far? Richard shook his head. I don't know. When I heard what had happened, how she'd done it, I was horrified. I tried to call you, but your number had changed. My mother has always had a flair for the dramatic, I said, the understatement almost making me laugh despite everything. But this was extreme even for her. Catherine is ... He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. She's complex. Always. Has been. There's a part of her that needs to be the center of every story, the controller of every situation. Maybe she couldn't bear the thought of anyone else revealing her secret. Maybe she wanted to be the one to end things on her terms. Or maybe she'd simply wanted to hurt me one last time. To ensure that the daughter, who had always been a living reminder of her sin, would never find happiness with the son of the man. She'd sacrifice everything for her. Does your wife know? I asked. About me? Yes, I told her before we moved to Connecticut. It nearly ended our marriage, but we worked through it. She never wanted you to know. Never wanted Carter to know. She was afraid of exactly what's happened, that the truth would destroy everything. The front door opened then, and a woman entered, Carter's mother, Susan Marshall. She stopped short when she saw me, her face draining of color. Eliza, she said, her voice barely audible. What are you doing? Here? Finding answers, I replied, since no one else seemed inclined to give them to me. She set down her purse with deliberate care, as if afraid any sudden movement might shatter the fragile moment. I see. And have you found what you were looking for? Some of it. I know about the affair, about my birth, about Richard's cancer, and his request that my mother tell me and Carter the truth. I turned back to Richard. What I still don't understand is why none of you ever told us before. Why wait until we were engaged? Why not tell us when we first met, or better yet, years ago, when we were children? Because we were cowards, Susan said simply, surprising me with her candor. All of us, Richard because he couldn't bear to break. His promise to your father. Me because I couldn't bear to reopen that wound. Your mother because she couldn't bear to admit her mistakes. And your father because he couldn't bear to lose you. She moved to stand beside her husband's chair, placing a hand on his shoulder. We all made choices we thought were protecting someone. You and Carter were the ones who paid the price. Her honesty disarmed me. I'd come expecting defensiveness, denial, more lies. Not this raw acknowledgement of collective failure. I've had a lot of time to think about this, Susan continued, about what we should have done differently. The truth is, there was no perfect solution, no path that wouldn't have caused pain to someone. But we should have given you both the dignity of choice, the knowledge to make your own decisions. She looked at me directly, her gaze unflinching. I'm sorry, Eliza. Truly, deeply sorry. The apology, so simple, so unqualified, hit me with unexpected force. Tears sprang to my eyes, the first I'd allowed myself since that day in Jess's apartment. Carter doesn't know I'm here, I said, struggling to maintain composure. I haven't spoken to him since the wedding. He's devastated, Richard said quietly. Blames himself for not telling you sooner, for letting it go as far as it did. It wasn't his fault, I said, surprising myself with the realization that I meant it. He was as much a victim in this as I was. Will you talk to him? Susan asked. Not now, not if you're not ready, but someday he needs closure, I think, as I imagine you do, closure. Such a neat, clinical word for the messy, ragged ending of what should have been a love story. Maybe, someday. I looked around the living room at the family photos on the mantel, Carter as a child, as a teenager, as a young man. The life he'd had while I lived mine, separate but connected by a secret none of us had known. But first, there's someone else I need to talk to. The doorbell rang as if on cue. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could make out a familiar silhouette. My mother had arrived. Richard struggled to his feet. Catherine called this morning. Said she was coming to see me. I didn't know you'd be here. Of course she had. The gala in Boston had been a convenient lie, a way to ensure I wouldn't find her at home while I searched for answers. She'd been coming here all along. Perfect timing, I said, moving to open the door myself. Let's make it a real family reunion. My mother stood on the porch, impeccably dressed as always, her surprise at seeing me quickly masked by a composed smile. Eliza, what a surprise. Is it? I stepped back, allowing her to enter. Somehow I doubt that. She swept into the room with the confident grace that had always defined her, nodding to Richard and Susan as if this were a social call rather than a confrontation 30 years in the making. I see we're all here, she said, surveying the room. How convenient. Why did you do it? I asked, cutting through her practiced poise. Why wait until my wedding day to tell me the truth? She turned to me, her expression carefully neutral. I was trying to protect you. From what? Marrying my half-brother. You could have done that months earlier, years earlier. It's not that simple, Eliza. Then explain it to me. Make it simple. She glanced at Richard, something unreadable passing. Between them, when Richard called to tell me about his diagnosis, about Carter dating someone named Eliza Bennett, I thought it was some cosmic joke. That out of all the women in New York, my daughter had found Richard's son. She shook her head. I told myself it wouldn't last, that you'd break up naturally, the way most relationships do, that I'd never have to tell either of you the truth. But we didn't break up, I said. We got engaged. Yes, her voice hardened slightly, despite my best efforts to discourage it. I remembered her lukewarm response to our engagement announcement, the subtle ways she'd tried to create distance between Carter and me, suggesting I was rushing things, highlighting our differences, mentioning other men she thought might be more suitable. You tried to break us up? I tried to prevent a tragedy, she corrected, to spare you both the pain you're feeling now. By manipulating us, by lying to us, by giving you an opportunity to choose a different path, she said. But you were so determined, so in love. The last word came out with the faintest hint of derision. When you insisted on moving forward with the wedding, I had to tell Carter the truth. But not me, I noted. You told him, but not me. I thought he would end it quietly, make up some excuse, let you believe it was his choice to walk away. So I'd be heartbroken, but in the dark, still believing the lie. Yes, she admitted without apology. Exactly that. But he wouldn't do. It, Richard interjected, wouldn't lie to you. My mother's mouth tightened. No, he insisted you deserved to know the truth. that keeping you in ignorance was cruel. We argued about it for weeks. Time was running out. The wedding was approaching. He refused to be the villain in the story. So you decided to be the villain instead, I said, understanding dawning. To stage a dramatic revelation on the wedding day itself. To be the one who saved me from an incestuous marriage at the last possible moment. She didn't deny it. I did what was necessary, what no one else had the courage to do. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know, I said, my voice rising. You let me plan an entire wedding, knowing it could never happen. You watched me fall in love with my own brother and did nothing to stop it until it was too late. I was trying to find the right moment, she insisted, the right way to tell you. And a dramatic confrontation in the garden on my wedding day was what you came up with. That was your idea of the right way. You weren't supposed to find us together, she said, a flash of genuine emotion breaking through her controlled facade. I was going to speak to Carter alone first, then come to you. But you saw us, and everything fell apart. I laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. Things had already fallen apart, Mother. They fell apart the moment you decided to lie to me. To all of us. I did what I thought was best, she said, her voice hardening again. I always have. Best for who? I challenged. For me? For Carter? Or for yourself? She didn't answer, but I saw it in her eyes, the flicker of recognition, of truth finally acknowledged. She had always acted in her own interest, justified her choices as protection when they were really about control. I want to know one thing, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. Could you ever love me? Really love me, not as an obligation or a burden or a reminder of your mistakes, but as your daughter. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of a lifetime of emotional distance, of seeking approval that never came, of trying to matter to someone who couldn't see me clearly. Of course I loved you, she said automatically, the words practiced perfect and utterly empty. Don't lie to me, I said quietly. Not anymore. Not about this. Something shifted in her expression, then a cracking of the mask she'd worn for as long as I could remember. For a moment, I glimpsed the woman beneath the performance, vulnerable and flawed and frighteningly human. I tried, she said finally. I wanted to, but every time I looked at you, I saw my greatest mistake, the affair that almost destroyed my marriage, the lie I've lived with for 30 years. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. It was easier to keep my distance. 2. Love you from a safe remove. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was honest, perhaps the first truly honest thing she'd ever said to me. I'm sorry, Eliza, Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. For all of it, for the pain we've caused you, for the life you might have had if we'd made different choices. I looked at him, this dying man who was my biological father, who had watched me grow up from a distance, who had kept his promise to stay away even when it broke his heart. At Susan, who had accepted her husband's infidelity and its consequences with a grace I couldn't imagine. At my mother, who had lived so long with her secrets that she'd forgotten how to live without them. They had all failed me in different ways and for different reasons. But they were human, flawed and frightened, and doing the best they could with the impossible situation they'd created. I can't forgive you, I said honestly. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I understand. And that's enough for now. I turned to leave, suddenly exhausted by the weight of so many truths, so many confessions. But my mother's voice stopped me at the door. Eliza. Her voice was different, somehow stripped of its usual polish, raw with an emotion I'd never heard from her before. I do love you, in my way. It's not enough. I know that. It's never been enough, but it's true. I didn't turn around, couldn't bear to see whatever expression accompanied those words. Goodbye, Mother. Outside, the summer air was heavy with the scent of hydrangeas and freshly cut grass. I walked to my rental car, my steps lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't known I was carrying. The truth hadn't healed me, but it had freed me. And for now, that was enough. 6 months later, I stood in the terrace room of the Gramercy Park Hotel, watching as sunlight fractured through the crystal chandeliers, painting tiny rainbows across white tablecloths. The same room where at 16 I'd first imagined my wedding. The same hotel where 6 months ago, that wedding had imploded in spectacular fashion. "Are you sure about this?" Jess asked, straightening the collar of my blazer. "We could have met anywhere in the city. It didn't have to be here." "It did," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "This is where it ended. It feels right that it's also where something new begins." The book launch had been my publisher's idea, a public event to celebrate the memoir. I'd written in months since my non-wedding. Blood Ties, a memoir of family secrets and survival. The story had poured out of me once I started writing, raw and honest and ultimately healing. Writing had been my salvation, the way I'd processed the unprocessable, made sense of the senseless, reclaimed my narrative from those who had controlled it for so long. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother's dramatic revelation, intended to devastate me, had instead given me my voice. The book was already generating buzz in literary circles, my editor predicting it would be a bestseller. "He's here," Jess said quietly, nodding toward the entrance. Carter stood in the doorway, looking both familiar and like a stranger. 6 months in California had given him a tan, lightened his hair. He'd grown a beard, but his eyes, our eyes, were the same, watching me with a combination of wariness and hope. We'd spoken only once since the wedding day, a brief phone call 3 months ago when Richard Marshall had died, a conversation limited to practical matters, to expressions of condolence, to the careful dance of two people who share too much history and too much pain to be casual acquaintances, but too much awkwardness to be anything else. "I can tell him to leave," Jess offered, protective as always. "No, it's okay. I invited him." I squeezed her hand. "I'll be fine." I crossed the room, weaving between tables being set for the evening's event. He watched me approach, hands in his pockets, stance uncertain. "Eliza," he said when I reached him. "You look well." "So do you," I replied, meaning it. The haunted look he'd worn on our wedding day was gone, replaced by something calmer, more settled. "California agrees with you. It's been good for me, a fresh start." He gestured around the room, bold choice of venue. "Poetic justice," I said with a small smile. "Reclaiming the space." He nodded, understanding. "I read the manuscript. Your publisher sent it." And I held my breath, suddenly nervous. I'd been brutally honest in the book about him, about us, about the family that had failed us both. "It's brilliant," he said simply. "Painful to read, but brilliant. You've always been the writer between us. Thank you." The words felt inadequate for the complexity of the moment, for reading it, for understanding. "I should be thanking you," he said, "for not vilifying me, for seeing that I was caught in the same web of lies you were. We were both victims of choices made long before we met," I said, the realization still new enough to sting. "Neither of us is to blame for what happened." He looked around the room, at the hotel staff setting up for the evening's event, at the posters bearing my book cover and photo. "You've done something amazing with the pain, Liz. Transformed it into art. I'm in awe of that. What about you?" I asked, "What are you doing in California?" "Photography," he said, a genuine smile lighting his face for the first time. I finally took the leap, left finance, started my own studio, and shooting weddings, if you can believe the irony. "That's wonderful," I said, surprised by how genuinely happy I felt for him. "You always loved it." I'm glad you're finally doing it. Life's too short for the wrong path, he said, a shadow crossing his face. Richard's death taught me that, if nothing else. I nodded, thinking of the man I'd barely known, who had died just months after I discovered he was my biological father. We'd spoken only twice more after that confrontation in Connecticut brief. Awkward conversations where neither of us knew quite how to be father and daughter after 30 years of being strangers. I'm sorry about Richard, I said. That you lost him so soon after everything else. He was at peace at the end, Carter said. Said he was glad the truth was finally out, regardless of how painful it was. That secrets take a toll on the keeper as much as those kept in the dark, a lesson my mother had yet to learn. She'd retreated to Europe after Richard's funeral, maintaining a dignified distance from the scandal. Her only communication had been a brief email acknowledging receipt of my manuscript, noting a few factual corrections she felt should be made before publication. I'd ignored them all. Will you stay for the launch? I asked, surprising myself with the invitation. It's just a small thing. Reading, signing, reception afterward. He hesitated. Are you sure that's a good idea? People will talk. People have been talking for 6 months, I said with a shrug. Let them. We know the truth. The truth, he echoed. It still feels strange sometimes that we're siblings. I finished for him, the word no longer impossible to say. Half siblings, right? He smiled ruefully. Not a relationship either of us imagined having. No, I agreed, but maybe someday it could be a real one. Different than what we planned, but real. I'd like that, he said softly, if you would. Before I could answer, my publicist appeared at my elbow. Elisa, sorry to interrupt, but we need you for the pre-event photos. I'll be right there, I promised, then turned back to Carter. Stay if you want, or don't. It's your choice. Choice, the thing we'd both been denied for so long. The thing we now had the power to make for ourselves. As I stepped toward the cameras, I felt the weight of the past loosen its grip, not erased, but transformed. And for the first time in years, the future felt entirely mine.